Mother Nature knows how to pack a punch. How Jim Cantore takes on a storm. And living on the razor's edge of disaster and survival. What drives Warren Faidley's obsession to witness more. This is NTWC Live.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to NTWC Live for Wednesday. It's June the 14th, and we're happy to have you along with us today. We have an exciting program scheduled. However, maybe because of a severe weather outbreak in the Deep South, perhaps we've not been able to get our guests online yet today. Both Warren Faidley and Jim Cantore. Hopefully they'll be able to jump on here in just a little while, but we're not sure just yet. But we'll definitely have a fascinating conversation with Bill Reed and Hurricane Hal in just a little bit as well. So we'll get to that in just a second. I want to thank our sponsors who make these programs possible each and every day. USAA, the South Padre Island Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Weather Company, and Weather Boy. Those are the organizations that really make it possible for us to do these programs week in and week out and get us all gathered here on our computers to talk with you all. The tropics are relatively quiet right now. We'll talk about that a little bit later on, but let's bring in first Bill Reed just to say good morning, and then we'll get to Hurricane Hal, Dr. Hal Needham in just a second. Good morning, Bill.
Good morning, everybody from the heat wave capital of the planet this week. After Hal's segment there, I'm going to just show you what's fairly quiet going on in the tropics, obviously.
Well, we're talking about, our scheduled guests that aren't with us right now, but we are expecting a pretty good outbreak in the South today. And we're guessing that they may be a little tied up getting into position for what happens today. It looks like it could be rough. Yeah,
it's a moderate risk, and the discussion on it this morning talked about the setup being off the charts as far. They have these at SPC, the Storm Prediction Center. They have these historical stuff on the soundings and the instability lapse rates and whatnot that are very important for large hail creation are forecast to be higher than any they've observed this time of year. It's very late in the severe weather season for a Deep South event. And the shear will be enough shear in there that if discrete supercells get going, a strong tornado or two can't be ruled out.
Well, all of us are in a different part of the South, and I know that parts of Texas had some big hail. Was it yesterday? We had some big hail up north compared to me, but compared to you guys too.
Last 4 or 5 days, I think we've had hailstorms producing big hail across the southern plains.
Dr. Howe, you're in Galveston this morning, as always. How are things in Galveston today?
It feels more climatologically normal now. The heat and humidity have returned, and that consistent south wind at 14 to 16 miles an hour has returned. The previous several weeks were surprisingly a little bit cool, very dry as far as the dew points, and calm and variable winds. So now it's feeling a little more like summer here in Galveston.
Well, things kind of settling into place so the way we expected. We were, same thing here. We had in Deep South Texas. I'm on the border of McAllen. We had for 2 months regular thunderstorms, severe thunderstorms. We had more severe thunderstorm and tornado warnings here so far this year than we've had in any year historically. And we're all getting tired. Everybody's just getting tired. It's like, yeah, enough. But now the faucet's been turned off, and it went from, a 40% chance of storms every day to 102. Yesterday was 103 in McAllen, and the real feel, or the apparent temperature, was 121 at one point during the afternoon. It's just crazy how the heat has set in now in this part of the country.
Probably your dew points are enhanced from evaporation of all that rain you got in recent weeks, which is, don't need enhanced dew points down here in the summer.
Yeah, they're high enough as it is. They've been running about 78, 79, and that's inland. South Padre Island, where, of course, we have our conference, dew points have been sitting at 80, 81, and Hal, I'm guessing that's probably about where you are in Galveston with dew points close to 80.
I think they've been at least in the upper 70s. I saw a 79 yesterday, and the forecast through the weekend, the heat indices may get up around 115 to 117, that would be the hottest I've seen in my 7 years here. So it looks like some real heat, especially this weekend and beyond.
That's pretty amazing.
Looks like Jim Cantore
is here.
Yeah.
I see Mr. Cantore.
What's up, kids?
Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm good. I just finished recording Weather Gone Viral, which is a show we have on the Weather Channel that's been going for like 10 years. So I said, guys, I got to go. I got to talk to my boys about tropical season. All right. So This will have to be
Go
continued
people to
later.
see.
Anyway, yeah.
Well, Bill, let me let you do the official introduction now that Jim's here, and we'll go from there.
Oh, it's good to see you, Jim. Jim Cantore, as most of you, I'm sure, know, has been with the Weather Channel all of your career, I suspect.
Yeah, all of it.
Since
Crazy.
graduating from Linden State College. And the trivia question for today's Jeopardy is, where in the hell is Linden State College? But I'll let Jim talk about that. He covers all major weather events in addition to from the studio. Jim gets out in the field with these, and that's kind of what we were wanting to talk about today. And I like the statement in there that you're the meteorologist viewers hate to see coming, because it means if you're in town, the storm's heading their way. And so I understand that. I'm really glad to see you this morning, because I shaved. I'm retired. I don't shave every Wednesday, and I was going to be really hacked at you if you didn't make it.
Yeah, I don't even recognize you, Bill.
Right.
I don't. It's crazy. No, I'm just kidding. You look great, buddy.
Clean shaven, yeah. And Jim and I have known each other at least since I was at the Hurricane Center, and we compare notes on that. We both had similar passions starting out in winter storms, and as we migrated south, the other fascinating weather has gotten a bug in our ear too, right, Jim?
Absolutely. Things like thunder, snow, what's happening on the golf course, the particular morning that we have a tea time together, just stuff like that. I mean, there's especially weather these days when you're talking about, like even today, guys, it's the first time we've had a moderate risk in Alabama since 2014 in the month of June. So that's it's just all these weird things going on in the weather. So it's worth talking about. Keeps us busy.
Yeah, we were just talking about that potential severe. We thought maybe we had lost you to the severe weather outbreak that's pending, and we probably lost Warren to severe weather chasing. It's been rather dramatic storms this week, but I don't remember this dynamic set up for mid-June along the Gulf Coast.
Yeah, and to see storms move, Bill. To have to actually move at like 30 miles an hour, that far down near I-10. I mean, that's just absolutely nuts. So, we're in for a heck of a day. I think it got started last night, and yesterday we had, 5.5 inch diameter hail in West Texas. Mm-hmm. The state record 6.4 inches. So you kind of know you're into something big here. And today, sadly, is going to be one of those days. We'll see how much of it tornadoes at the end, but certainly big hail, big wind. Over a pretty large area for sure.
Yeah, it seemed that kind of lapse rate and the dry air on top like that when
exactly
North Texas was a downburst threat that we really worried about in this time of year.
Yeah.
So anyway, you guys go out in the field still when there's a severe weather going on, and could you kind of go over for our listeners the process you go through to try to make sure you're doing it safely?
Yeah, I mean, let's just put it this way. Hurricanes and snowstorms are more our wheelhouse in terms of sending people from the Weather Channel out. Now there's just so many, chasers and people out there full time that are doing it, especially during severe weather season or something that pops up unexpectedly. We go to them. We found it's actually cheaper. So there's a lot more business decisions being made. What is our return on investment? Is it worth sending 4 crews out, or is it worth just paying chasers that are already out there and are closer to the stuff that could get us stuff quicker than if we just put Jim or Mike or Charles or Reynolds or whoever in a spot and then have them have to get to that spot. So we just, from a business decision, it's really hurricanes and winter storms, because you can kind of build to the crescendo, so to speak. But obviously we want to be in the worst of it. We want, with live view that's come along, this technology in the last 10 years and the speed of cell phones, we can literally put out an HD audio and visual product around the whole storm. You don't have to be vacant from the storm from when it starts to come in to when it ends. And instead of having to bring a satellite truck dish down, we don't even use dishes anymore. I mean, obviously, if we lose cell towers, which has certainly been the case with the last few storms that have come in, the big 4s and 5s. You'll have to have a cell or a satellite truck standing by, because that is your cell tower. And so that's really the decision that we make there. But otherwise, we just go off this live view, send out anywhere from 5 to 10 crews. You're out there in shifts, you're going through it. We talk about safety. We certainly make sure that that's a priority. And then we go through it, brother. And then it's the Super Bowl. First quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. And then even, after the game, there's the post game show.
Yeah, I think the showing of the response and the initial steps of the recovery are very important. It brings home to people just how bad the big boys are when they come inland like that.
Right. And people want to see, I mean, if we ask them to evacuate, which is what I told you guys at the meeting, and that's kind of been the way I think. It's like, look, if I'm going to ask you to evacuate your home, the least I could do is take you through it. All right. From the safest location that I can find. Are there times where I probably should come in out of it, especially at 59 years old now? Yeah. Even at 29, there's probably times I should have come out of it a little bit earlier. But, you're so sucked in and the adrenaline is running and rushing so bad. Sometimes you just kind of get in that moment, and you have somebody looking on to you and says, you know what, Jim, maybe it's a good time to come in out of the storm. And I certainly probably should have done that earlier in Ian, because that was a hell of an eye wall, man. Even in Punta Gorda, it didn't break down all that much. That's for sure.
Yeah. So, yeah, I guess there's it's a double-edged sword. There's a lot of people, not a lot, but there's an undercurrent of sentiment that you shouldn't be out there because it's like, do as I say, not as I do.
Yes.
Messaging going on out there. And I hope you keep doing it safely. When do you think, or do you think there'll be a time where remote sensing technology will replace you physically having to be out in the field with the storm?
I mean, I think maybe during the meat of the storm, that may become more prevalent, to not actually have someone there, because the way we can set up cameras these days and actually just voice over what we're seeing. I mean, let's face it, once I moved to the parking garage, that's essentially what I was doing anyway. I wasn't in the shot all that much. I could just show everybody, we were going to the backside of the eye wall of Ian in Punta Gorda. So, that I think is going to become much more prevalent. But then there's the aftermath, Bill, and you have to be able to get out there and tell the story immediately. How bad was it? Who did it impact? What can we show emergency management at the state level, at the federal level? What needs to be done? What needs to be brought in? What's been pre-staged? Is it enough to take care of the issues at hand? Those kind of things I still think need a human there.
Well,
and that's important.
The human experience of talking to people that survive it.
Exactly.
I don't see robots catching on to the emotional impact of these things.
No, I don't.
It's interesting. Yeah. Well, maybe we can design robots that look like Jim Cantore that go out in the storm.
What's funny is, what was it? A year ago, a year ago, they asked me during our 40th anniversary, Jim, what do you think the broadcaster of the future is going to be? And I said, honestly, probably like a holograph that can follow decoded information from a model that is updated every 15 minutes or an hour, and even have emotional tie-ins to how they're and tone to how they're broadcasting that information. So we could bring back anybody, Bill. Yeah. We could put a young Bill Reed on the air if we wanted to. You know what I'm saying? With that same kind of emotion and whatnot, that matches what the forecast is showing us per what the guidance is telling us, especially in the short term. I don't know, holographs maybe.
Yeah, you sound like George.
So Bill, what that's telling me is it's a good time to retire soon, right? Following your footsteps.
getting close to there.
Yes, sir.
As long as you have something interesting, I can't see you going back and sitting in an easy chair every day.
No. Here's what somebody told me once about retirement. They said, Jim, if you can't picture and tell me what you're going to do when you retire right now, then you're not ready.
Yeah.
So until you know that, and the fact that you still love what you do, then that's what you need to do.
Yeah.
Just keep doing it.
As long as you remember that curveballs happen, and you may actually end up doing something totally different than what you imagined when you retire.
That's true. That's absolutely true.
Yeah. Good. Hal, chime in here.
Yeah, Jim, when we were in South Padre in April, I asked you, with all your years of documenting and broadcasting from extreme weather, what event surprised you the most? You mentioned the blizzard conditions in Western New York this past around Christmas time. I mean, let's follow up on that. What about that event was so shocking to you?
I mean, the fact that you had, literally a damn hurricane blizzard, they say the winds of a hurricane with the cold thrown in there, obviously cold doesn't even matter in a blizzard. It's all about visibility and wind speed, right, per time. But the fact that you had that in there, and everybody was in this mode of, look, dude, I've got Christmas to worry about and getting the G.I. Joe with the Kung Fu grip. I don't need to worry about, this blizzard. But we couldn't have been more wrong. I just think that out of all the things that we talk, flooding, tornadoes, even wildfire and hurricane, usually we can hide pretty good from a blizzard, right? But this one was just caught so many people off guard because their attention was somewhere else. And I get it. It's their only downtime. It's their only time to spend with the family. They got to shop for this and shop for that and get here and get there. There was just way too many deaths.
Yeah, you don't expect in the snow belt of New York, you're going to see more than 40 fatalities, right?
Exactly. So there's some way we got to interrupt and say, hey guys, it's all about the messaging, as it is with flooding still. People just don't turn around. Mm-hmm. They still drown. And I don't know why, especially after all the videos that we've seen. But now it's like, okay, well, if it's a holiday, if it's Labor Day, Bill, and and we've got a rapid developer, or Hal, or Tim, or anybody else out there, Alex, all of a sudden we got to get everybody out of harm's way because we got a late season rapid developer that's going to come up and blow up with these warm waters that we've got. And we don't have time to evacuate everybody. And we can't create a mass panic, but yet we've got to get people out of this surge zone and also protect some people from the wind. So we got to do that without a panic. We got to interrupt this regularly scheduled holiday to get people out of harm's way.
Yeah, when I was MIC down here, all those years, the big fear was the Labor Day, to have a hurricane approaching on the Labor Day weekend, and trying to convince people that have no idea what a hurricane can do there, that they really have to vacation short and get off.
Guys, is that true to some degree on weekends in general? I mean, I think back to Katrina just blowing up on a Sunday. Might there have been a bit of a different outcome if that was a midweek storm?
You know what? I think being down in Gulfport and Biloxi, I can tell you that everyone thought, well, this is not going to be Camille. It's not going to, and see, this is where the category thing comes up again. It's not going to be a Cat 5 when it comes in. So, this is where we really should have honed in on, guys, it doesn't matter. It's about the size of the doggone thing and the fact that it produced Cat 5 surge that's just being shoved into the Gulf Coast. So, it had to be more that message. Because I remember, all these, casinos that are, and remember back then they were out over the water because that's the way they could make it legal or whatever to get around the legalities of it. And there was nothing being done. So the typical calm before the storm on Saturday, nobody's doing anything. There's not an evacuation order. And so I remember I had to start pointing to things like the Pirates Cove or whatever the heck it was, casino, the pirate ship and saying this thing's going to be underwater. Guys, they're forecasting 25 foot of storm. That's going to be underwater. So I remember the mayor distinctly coming down to me, Mayor Calloway, and he says, "Dude, you're scaring everybody." And I'm like, "Good, because we got to get everybody out of here. This is awful."
I hope. I think in a lot of communities, those kind of the large number of really bad events we've had in those years have led to better.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
On each other. When we were down in Rockport this weekend recording a post 6 years after Harvey, how things are going, and it was just amazing to me to listen to how well planned the people were, what the officials had their act together, even though they hadn't had a big hurricane themselves in eons, not in their careers, obviously, and they did the right things with a very short notice storm. Remember, Harvey didn't give them more than about
right. All of a sudden, we got a Cat 4 coming to the Central Coast. Absolutely.
We only had that one day from when we thought it would be a major hurricane to get people out of harm's way, and they were kind of apologetic that only 60 to 70% of the people evacuate. And I said, that's pretty typical. Even with 5 days notice, you don't get big percentages of evacuation. So I think we're making some headway there.
I still kind of wonder where the sweet spot is in warning. I mean, Ian was another one that just kind of came up quick. And then it kind of played with the cone, which there's a big difference between the Florida Panhandle and Fort Myers. That's a lot of real estate and a lot of people that you have to get out of harm's way. So that was one of those, Bill, that actually the intensity forecast, we had more confidence in the intensity than we did exactly where the center was going. Mm-hmm. So I think people, sometimes wait for last minute adjustments to all that. But, that's going to be our challenge for a long time.
Yeah, and there's many. We go through the whole litany of reasons, but as I think in the Fort Myers area, you have a large retirement community, and being in that age group, I'd probably be reluctant if I wasn't skin in the game kind of my career kind of thing to knowing what it would do. I think I would be reluctant to boogie. I would have probably waited to be very certain. And then it would be, oh my, roads are full of cars. There's nowhere to stay inland anymore. Now what do I do?
Well, and that's the other thing too. Are too many people leaving? I mean, not everybody has to leave. We just have to get out of these evacuation zones, right? And obviously, if you're not in a very well constructed home, we're expecting 125 to 150 mile an hour wind gusts. I mean, that's another issue. But those are the people that we need to get out of harm's way. Everyone else, especially if they're to code or they've upgraded to code, should be able to ride it out. And so not everybody has to get, massively leave or drive 4 hours to a location to get out of harm's way. And so, I mean, we've almost kind of swung the pendulum a little bit too much to the other side. But I don't know if somebody wants to leave, then you know what? If they don't feel safe, who am I to tell them they can't? Right?
I think, and it ricochets back and forth. We had that awful post-Katrina result of our Rita evacuation, where more people that didn't have to leave left than did. Everybody left.
Oh gosh. Yes.
So Ike comes along, and most of it worked like it was supposed to. The people in the surge zones evacuated to a certain degree, and most of the others stayed, and they were stuck without power for 4 weeks. Say, I'm never staying again. So we think the next time they call an evacuation, you'll have a subset of the population that experienced like adversely due to no power and whatnot say, I'm not doing this. I'm heading to some state that begins with O.
And I can guarantee you, you'll hear that soundbite. Listen, I stayed for Ian. I'm not staying for this one. I don't care what it is. So yeah, that you'll absolutely hear that.
The Rockport mayor was very, he said just about anybody he talked to that didn't evacuate said never again.
Yeah. Jim, I had a question. Jim, how do we get the focus off of the category and on to really like believing what the storm surge models say? A lot of people I talked to in Punta Gorda said, I didn't get storm surge from category 4 Charlie. Why is this category 4 putting 5 feet of water in my house, right? Any
Well,
advice on how we can message that?
what is the most, if you close your eyes for a second, what do you see graphically in your head with Ian? It's a cone, right? Cone, cone, cone. So that's what people see. And it's shown the most. So when you think about something like storm surge, which frankly was the most deadly part of that, that needs to be the lead.
Sure.
That needs to be the lead graphic. That needs to be the graphic
Yeah.
that people see the most, whether it's in a cone form or is in some other form that gets the message across that this is the lead impact. But if you close your eyes for a second, all you can see is that cone. You can't see the storm surge graphics, which we had in the right place, as you guys know.
Jamie Rome was showing that the storm surge watches and warnings did not really shift that much, even as the cone shifted. And the NOAA's P Surge project, their product was really focused on really all along that central west Florida coast that was in danger.
Yeah, and you got to go backwards a step or two and remember that those decisions about evacuating for the surge have to be made probably down there
Yes.
36 to 48 hours in advance, and the uncertainty's still fairly large there, especially with a forecast it's not normal the coast, but closer to parallel. Then very small deviations in the track lead to huge deviations in the exact point of landfall, which, as Hal just pointed out with the storm surge, wasn't all that relevant.
Yeah, angle of approach, Bill. Hal, that, Alex. It's all about angle of approach, speed. How many tide cycles are we going to go through? How big is this thing before it gets in? I mean, there's so many questions. Plus, you're assuming maximum storm surge. You're assuming worst case scenario. So I just think, for some reason, I want to see people get a bigger takeaway from a storm surge graphic, whatever it looks like, than what they get right now. Instead of eyeballing that cone and saying, well, it kind of came in on the edge of the cone.
Yeah, you have to personalize it, and I don't think we're there yet, but we're heading there.
No. Yes.
Where Joe Schmuckatella at 405 Peach Street can punch in his address, and the hazard will show up, showing what risk his house is at. His house.
Bill, do you remember that at the Flash conference? Somebody brought in a program or an example of one where you could do that, and you could get almost an image of what the water would look like at certain heights. So if you know the forecast, why can't we make that real time? Where somebody just goes to this program. I don't care if it's the hurricane centers, if it's flashes, whoever, local emergency management can go in there and actually do that and actually look at a Google map of where the water is going to be. That speaks volumes to me. When you see water surrounding your home.
You and I are cool with maps, but I think until you get it down to the house level, which is a monumental programming task, I suspect, but I think we're going there. I think we'll be there eventually.
Right.
Yeah, and guys, something with that graphic, people, if they know their elevation, they just assume that's above mean sea level. It's above something called a datum. Usually people are 1 or 2 feet closer to the water than they realize. So where I live in Galveston, mean sea level's at 1 foot, high tide's at 2 feet. So if the Hurricane Center says an 8-foot surge, that's going up to 10 feet on the tide gauge. People may find floodwater in their house and they say, how did a 9-foot surge flood my 10-foot house? Again, a graphic like that showed them could really help with that communication.
Yeah, and it's their house. Right. So it's like, this is actually my house underwater. Hey guys, can you excuse me for 1 second? I just got to open my door.
Perfect.
Okay.
We're gonna turn it over to Hal. Is going to do a little piece on his GeoTrek, and then we'll come back to you when you're ready.
All right. Yeah, it won't take very long at all. Thank you.
Tim.
That's the GeoTrek podcast. We're going to talk more with Hal here in just a second. I want to thank our sponsors. We're part of this program: USAA, the South Padre Island Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Weather Company, and Weatherboy. They make these programs a possibility. So you saw the intro there for what Hal's doing with the GeoTrek podcast and CNC Catastrophe. Hal, take it away with what we're going to talk about today for a moment.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I'm going to share my screen here. Great conversation this morning with Jim Cantore. I love asking all these questions and learning from his experience. I'm sharing my screen here, talking a little bit about the GeoTrek project. With that, we're traveling the world, getting stories about extreme weather and natural disasters that are not covered by the mainstream media. Check out the GeoTrek podcast. FeedSpot, they rank podcasts around the world. They rank the GeoTrek podcast as the #1 podcast on natural disasters. Well, recently I did a podcast with Tim Riker, the Contrarian Emergency Manager. Really interesting episode number 71 there. We were talking about how to plan for natural disasters. This is a 3-minute clip from our conversation that I think you'll really enjoy, talking about the importance of planning with Tim Riker, the Contrarian Emergency Manager.
Anybody that wants to do that. Tim, I want to land the plane here with one last question for you. It's the magic wand question. If you had a magic wand to change one thing in your profession, what would it be?
Better plans.
Nice.
People need to write better plans. Here's the caveat on the magic wand. I don't want the better plans to just magically appear. I want the magic wand to motivate people to build plans the right way, because there's also a huge benefit to that collaborative engagement.
Guys, can you hear that audio?
Yes.
You can. Okay. I just wanted to check. We'll keep going.
Of building a plan.
I was just going to use the word collaborative. You brought that up several times in this podcast, people working together, bringing all the stakeholders to the table. It sounds like it's more than just putting a 30-page piece of paper on a desk and say the plan's done. A lot of it's the process of how you got there, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's when people put in the work, they get a better product out of it. And it's, sometimes a challenge being a consultant, because I get hired to write disaster plans. Well, sure, I can, put some stuff together and I can mail you a 3-inch binder that's going to have your plan in it. But you know what? It's not your plan. It's my plan that I wrote for you. So
that's right. You weren't involved in that process. Yeah.
Right. So without their engagement, without their local knowledge, without them establishing what the priorities are, I have a lot of experience doing these things. I can leverage a lot of that experience. I can facilitate that process, but the ownership of it has to be theirs. They have to put in the work. I can type. I tell folks 85% of my job is typing. But they need to give me the content.
Yeah, and I'm not an emergency manager, but from my friends in the field, it seems like the term relationships comes up a lot too. That again, when the response hits, you want to fall back on those relationships that were developed at the workshops and when it was sunny and 75 degrees, right? Because now there's a flood, and now is not the time to try to foster new relationships, right? Those should already be there.
Exactly. I want to have already known you, Hal. So if we're both going to show up on a disaster scene together, I don't want to be meeting you for the first time and trying to figure out who you are, who you work for, what your agency's priorities are, what you bring to the table, what your capabilities are, that kind of stuff. If I know that stuff ahead of time, if both of us know that stuff ahead of time, then we're already several steps ahead.
That's right. We have the relationship. We have the trust, right? When you give perspective on something, I know this guy, we've been in workshops together for a decade. I can trust what he says, right?
Yep.
Tim, thank you.
Guys, cool stuff there. We're talking about the GeoTrek podcast, that episode with Tim Riker, talking about better plans and how, it's really interesting, that collaborative approach of working together with your communities to build a plan. I've seen a lot of collaboration across state borders that are developed at a workshop when it's sunny and 75 degrees, so that when the flood or the disaster hits, these communities are ready to work together and they have those relationships. Again, you can check out the GeoTrek podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. We're always getting into these deep questions about extreme weather and natural disaster, what their impacts are on society, and what we can do to get out ahead of them to mitigate their losses. Thanks, guys, for letting me share that. And I'll be back next time with another spotlight on the GeoTrek project.
Thanks, Hal. Before we get back to Jim, I think I'll give us everybody a quick update on the tropics. It's not anything serious going on in our neck of the woods, but it is worth talking about. find it here. All right, the current satellite loop showing our neck of the woods primarily. The Eastern Pacific, the convection has been increasing the last several days, and that is the area we'll be watching for the next 5 to 7 days for any possible development in that area. Many of you recall last week we were talking about the model cane that was supposed to be showing up.
Oh, jeez.
Down here, it's just not there yet, and it probably won't be. Further east in the Atlantic, all is very quiet, as you can see across the Caribbean, southwest of the Atlantic, and the open tropical waters of the Atlantic. Trade winds are starting to look like they're increasing a little bit by the indications in the cloud streets that are coming across there. And although the models occasionally show something in their ensembles, maybe out of one of the easterly waves coming off of Africa right now, there's nothing that we're particularly concerned with in that area. This is the conundrum that we're looking at. Normally, when you have a big El Nino coming on, like we're forecasting for this year, the waters in the Atlantic are nominally normal, or maybe even a little below normal. It's uncharted territory. I've seen many of the folks doing the seasonal forecasts, the scientists, kind of scratching their head. Now that I'm retired, Jim, I have fun with this stuff that's a conundrum. When I was a forecaster, it had me wringing my hands too. So I think it's one of those, get your bag of popcorn and prop yourself down and watch what happens.
Exactly. You don't have to pick a side right now. You can just kind of watch it all evolve. But that's it. It's interesting. I was listening to a blog or something that Daniel Swain was doing, kind of talking about how the volcano in the South Pacific last year sent up all this water vapor instead of ash. So he thinks that may be one of these signals that we're seeing here with these warm water temperatures, or at least a part of it. It didn't really block the sun much. It just kind of warmed the atmosphere versus
the water vapor also,
so there's so many things. It's like wow, where did that come from?
Yeah, that volcano was amazing, and all that water vapor. It's a short-lived, but it is a greenhouse gas, and the temperature is running hotter. When I first looked at that, I just said, well, it's just a combined effect that we're already running warm with the development of the El Nino, but the El Nino is still in kind of its infancy, so there may be something to that volcano, and it could be a long, hot summer.
He's a great follow. He's a great follow. A very brilliant young man. Bill, what do you think of next week with that wave kind of coming up toward the leewards? Do you think it'll be something that actually gets outlooked by NHC, or?
Remains to be seen, because it is out beyond the 7 days. But I was looking at
it may, but is it going to get through that?
The wind shear is hostile at least through 72 hours. It does look, it did look at an earlier model run I looked at that it would give it a little break, but I don't see any in the next 7 days. That's a screaming wind shear for the next week. And beyond that, it's what we're not supposed to be talking about anyway. This will change every which way between the events. So personally, my bet is that probably not.
But what you showed on the Pacific side pretty much holds true, right?
Yeah.
For El Nino, I mean, you're going to look at a more active East Pac typically.
Yeah, and Mike Lowry had a good blog post on that this morning, and the fact that the Eastern Pacific has been quiet so far is not surprising, because the Western Pacific have been very active, and you generally don't have both sides of it at the same time going on. So. This is, I think one of these waves in here would be the one that picks up on past 7 days. But that's what we start looking at. We're starting to get farther away from the equator, the clusters of thunderstorms moving across Africa. And we have a cyclone out here in the northern Indian Ocean. It's forecast to, let's see, I got to shrink something here. I can't get to my There we go. It's forecast to make landfall somewhere on the India-Pakistan border, moving quite slowly as a tropical storm. And we all know what that means in our neck of the woods. And it's a fairly large area of convection in there. So it wouldn't surprise me if we start hearing about flooding over there. I know nothing about the development in there and the risk of flooding in those areas, or I talk to that. So that's pretty much where we're at, looking at the tropics now. And, we might go through one of those years where it stays quiet till sometime in August and look for holes in the El Nino pattern.
Right.
Things going.
Close to home stuff, maybe, right?
Well, actually, yeah, maybe that could happen, a non-easterly wave type thing. But that 4 to 5 degrees above normal Eastern Atlantic, if that continues, the trade winds don't mix it back out, maybe we'll see the El Nino effect isn't as strong as you go further east, mainly a Caribbean, Gulf, and the Americas where we get the biggest impact. So you might look for storms form fairly quickly coming off of Africa and then recurve if they're far enough north out into the Atlantic.
Right, or they strengthen rapidly and curve as a result of that too. So that's, I mean, there's just so much to watch and speculate on. It's impossible to really know where it's going to go. Right.
Right. Yeah, we keep. I keep hoping the trend that I showed you in that data set from 1950 of no hurricanes making landfall in Texas during an El Nino.
Yes, I remember that map. Stuck in my head.
Hope we add another year to that. Me and my neighbors would be happy. And we were talking about how to get people aware. I did a little experiment in 2 neighborhoods now where I asked neighbors what the elevation of their property was. What do you think I got for answers?
I don't know. And
I don't know.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Those would be my guesses.
I don't know. I don't care. I'm not required to have flood insurance. That's what the answers were. Well, they're not. They're not required. That's
right.
They're right words. I had a few people say they don't need flood insurance, and I like the Harris County Flood Control's phrase on that. Does it rain where you live in Houston area? And the answer, of course, yes. You need flood insurance.
All right.
So are these areas around League City, like south of Houston, in the southern part of Houston Metro? And if so, did some of them have issues with Hurricane Harvey flooding?
Well, my last neighborhood, we were the street elevation's 12 feet, and those neighbors. Amazingly enough, we weren't required to have flood insurance. Apparently, that's not that the way the concept of how they were doing it there. We didn't rate the 100-year floodplain. I didn't believe it for a minute. I had flood insurance from day one living over there. Over here, it's a little different in that we're at like 20 street elevation is like 28 feet. So, yes, we're not in a surge zone. So, but
Jim, I was just having an extensive conversation with Bill on Saturday. We drove down to Rockport, Texas, and he was telling me he was out there in Harvey with his rain gauge, just trying his best to quickly get a knob and get it back up there. What did you get, over 45 inches at your house?
45.34. And I know I missed some the 2 times during the 4 to 6 inch an hour rainfall rates when I'd run back to the porch, measure it as quick as I can, and then get it back out there. Almost decided I need 2 rain gauges so that I can leave one always in the slot while that's going on. But hopefully I won't see one of those again. That was just so unbelievable.
Hey, Bill, I got a question for you. Have you guys talked to Jeff Lindner at all about what they've done, in Harris County? In terms of, taking lands that flooded and make them like holding reservoirs and things like that. I mean, it's kind of amazing what they've done there to hopefully alleviate what's going on.
Well, they're chipping away at it. I think the one thing they've done that staunched the bleeding that the developer types are constantly fighting to overturn is they set the benchmark as outside the 500-year elevation for flooding for new development. It's not perfect because we all know those things are not the science
Right.
behind it's questionable, but the way they looked at it, I think, was when they mapped that there was a distinct reduction in the number of properties would have been flooded. But buyouts are expensive, and getting enough, it's a tip of the iceberg thing. You got 120,000 homes flooded, you might buy out
Right.
a couple thousand of them at max out of Harvey. And
But I just think they're making an effort, which to me, like Jeff said, he goes, Jim, if we get 3 or 4 inches, 3, 4, 5 inches, it's kind of okay. But once you start getting in the 5 to 10 inch range, then we start getting a little nervous in a lot of these spots. So it's not every event, but the most extreme ones, obviously, which I think anybody would be concerned about, right? I mean, talk to the folks in Fort Lauderdale. I mean, that was crazy. 25 inches of rain. I mean, that's absolutely nuts.
Yeah, and it's if we're reading the tea leaves right about climate change, the warming of the Gulf waters, the ability of the atmosphere to hold more moisture, and then when the storms come, the very excessive rainfall rates, it's going to keep increasing. Or the new data,
Exactly.
the new NOAA Atlas, what was a 100-year rain event in Galveston County is now a 50-year event. That's the difference between 1965 data and 2019, I think, is when that went in there.
So can you just take that and simply say it's twice as likely to happen now? That kind of event?
That's
Essentially.
exactly right. And everything is designed around the 100-year event, which is folly, because we have, it doesn't mean you're not going to get above that. It's the yes/no thing. So you build all your infrastructure, your roads and everything to handle up to a 100-year event. And then you get the 500-year event, or in Harvey's case, the 1,000+ year event, and the whole thing comes crashing down on you.
And Harvey was like so extensive. How did you make a game plan to even cover a storm like that?
Oof. Well, I mean, we started out with a landfall. So we were down there, getting holes in our tires because of driving around in debris. So we covered that for a day. And then they're just like, Jim, get to Houston. This is kind of a breaking weather. So you gotta, and you kind of feel awful, because it's like, good Lord, these people just got ransacked and I got to leave them. I can't even show everybody for even 48 hours what's happened down here. I got to get up to the mess that's Houston, and then try and get around to show the flooding and talk about the flooding. But it is breaking weather, and at the end of the day, that's what we cover. And there's still time to go back, certainly, and do all that. There's certainly a lot more people impacted. But as a meteorologist who kind of went through the worst part of that, you kind of feel guilty about, like, oh my God, how can I leave these people? I mean, I want to show everybody what happened down here on the Central Coast. But we got the tires fixed. We got up there as quick as we can. Literally, we stopped on the side of the road. Helicopters were dropping people off to, an amphibious vehicle and driving them back through water and out of harm's. I mean, they were evacuating people as quickly as they could. So that's what happened. And literally that night, it's like, oh, where are we going to stay? So we had to embed with NBC at the time, and because they're so smart, and these big networks literally book hotels. They don't just book a couple of rooms; they book hotels, and so we got a chance to get a couple of their rooms to stay on hand and really talk about this story, which obviously lasted for days on end.
How did you get any mobility around Houston Metro in those conditions? Were you able to use boats, helicopters, or just try to find a high point with some visibility?
All of the above. Whatever we could do that. And that's the other thing too, because we're on in the morning, it's not like you can go see what's available to you as a track around here. It's like, okay, well, where's the water going? In some places it was still rising, and making other areas cut off. But you just kind of had to follow the story and get to the water's edge and tell it as best as you could. Because, I mean, even in Harvey, we didn't have the drone technology that we do today, right? Think about how much easier that would have made everything. It was more helicopters. You got stuff by helicopters once we finally cleared out. So the technology that we have today is going to make situations and disasters like that, God forbid we get them, much more easier to cover out of harm's way. Right.
Right. So
and that's what seems to be the trend is we're getting technology to get us more and more out of harm's way to tell the story.
That's right. Today you could get that drone up and someone in a safe location could narrate what we're seeing.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly right.
Cool. And I had a question, Jim, on the communication. The cell towers go out when the big boys hit. Is Starlink something you guys could tap into to maintain your communication, or is the bandwidth not there?
And I think that's actually been talked about. I don't know all the answers to that, Bill. That's a great question. But I have heard that mentioned. So it's absolutely something that's being looked into for sure. But the best thing to do is, I think the old school thing is, look, you have a satellite truck at your disposal, and granted that's older technology and it's expensive, and in a lot of cases it's not really budgeted, but when that's the story, you got to tell it however you can. And if a satellite truck by your side when cell tower's out, then so be it.
Yeah, we've been using the live views a lot, Jim. We use them in the SpaceX coverage because there's so many people on cell phones that you lose the cell signal for your
That's
live
right.
and everything else. So the Starlink really comes in handy, and it's such an easy setup that's what we've been using for our local station. Let me ask you a question that's come in from online, and we're going back to Ian and Lee County, and it's how do we improve the communication to the general public when the local authorities don't follow their own plan? How do you this was our plan, but we're not sticking to it?
Well, that's not good. I mean, you gotta stick with that. And I mean, one of the things that, as you guys know, and Bill, especially you, being part of the hurricane conference and the governor's hurricane conference in Florida, when we get emergency managers together with the weather enterprise, I mean, I still think that's a win-win. But, once we continue to educate everyone at that level, I mean, sometimes I think we think, Tim, that everyone knows meteorology like we do. And they don't. And it's when they start second guessing or listening to someone who's not an authority on the subject material, it's like, then we kind of get into trouble. So plus at the end of the day, I mean, you're closing down businesses. You're asking people to leave their homes. You're trying to move people around where you wouldn't necessarily have room. That has got to be one of the hardest jobs out there, because you want to know without any kind of a doubt that these are the things that you can do, and you want to wait till the last minute to do it. And we're not usually afforded that luxury. But I think at the beginning, I know for me, look, I'd rather be wrong, but get you out of harm's way and then have you come down on me and I'll tell you why I was wrong, than be wrong on the other side of it where I didn't tell you enough. Right?
That's the right way to look at it.
That's exactly how I look at it.
Kind of another way to word it is, if I can, if I try to downplay it and it comes in worse, it'll be too late for you to evacuate. That is why we have to go with a probability of a near worst case scenario and making those decisions, because you can't adjust your plan for when it's going to be worse. It's going to be too late.
We don't want to be wrong, but we have to face the fact that sometimes we will be. But at the end of the day, if everybody's safe, then we've won, right?
Right.
We've really won. Okay, so that's how to look at it. Exactly.
And Jim, you've been front and center for so many of these over the years. Have you found there's either a message or a way of messaging that resonates with people particularly well? You've been through so many, you see how people react. Is there something that makes them sit up and go, oh crap, this means something?
Well, it's what Bill talked about earlier. When people saw Katrina, everyone panicked during Rita, and everybody left Houston, which is bad. So that's almost like it over resonates. So I wonder what's going to happen if there's another threat for Southwest Florida. I mean, are people going to panic? So we have to be able to differentiate and just focus on those impacts. But if you start poking the snake and it bites you, you're not going to do it again usually. So sometimes it's just going through it that can be the best message. But, we still got work to do, Tim. We got work to do. We have to get a really good, concise message across. And it's hard because we don't know everything. We aren't always, and most of the time 100% sure exactly how it's going to play out. Because I've covered 110 of these guys over the last 30 years, 110, whether they be depressions, depression wannabes, sometimes double landfalls, hurricanes, tropical storms, everything. And sometimes different countries, even Belize, but they're all different. They're all different. And like we talked about with the difficulties of storm surge, what's angle of approach to the coast? What's the speed coming in? What's intensity going to be when it comes in? What's the tide going to be at the time it comes in? There's just a lot of things we cannot answer. So we have to play the worst case scenario role. And that's just the only way to win.
And our part is that the science, the meteorology and impact part is actually the easy part. Then you've got to factor in your spectrum of your population you're talking to. One that Ken Graham was very good at articulating was the range of risk aversion. Risk takers, they're going to wait to the last minute. They're willing to roll the dice and take a chance. I've got friends that live in Galveston. If there's a cluster of clouds in the Southern Gulf, they're packing their bags. So you communicate different. You have to communicate different. No one message will. The message that works won't work for the guy that's risk averse. And then you have the cultural differences and all that. It makes it. That's why we're spending a lot of time now in the science, bringing in social science into the research to see if we can crack that nut a little.
Yes, and that's brilliant. That's what we have to do, and we have to keep fine-tuning that. The other thing I will say, though, on Twitter, I have seen people reach out and they say, you know what, Jim, we have a plan now. We have a plan. We know what we're going to do as a family. We know what we're going to do if there's a tornado warning. We know who the contact person is. And so I really like seeing that. And, I like to put those messages back out and saying, see, it's cool to do this. Mm-hmm. And people feel comfortable. They feel much more comfortable about going about their day. And you can go about your business. You don't have to be in panic mode from the start of this thing, from when it comes off the coast to when it landfalls. You've got a legitimate plan in place, and the different stages of it. And I just think we need to keep harping on that and how important it is and how much more comfortable you're going to feel as a person and as maybe the leader of your family.
Well, that may be it's a tried and true method, and that may be something we need to keep hammering on, because that also takes the personality differences, if you will, out of the equation. If you can get everyone to plan, they'll plan based on their ability or their way of wanting to approach these things. Just by going through the thought process of making the plan, if it doesn't quite go according to plan, they'll be quicker to be able to react and adjust when the event occurs.
Yeah, and guys, we talked about the Rita Katrina reaction, and then Rita to Ike. And in Southwest Florida, I met a lot of people that almost drowned, and they said, hey, we've evacuated several times. Just 5 years ago, we evacuated for Irma, nothing happened. Jim, do you sometimes take into account, although you may have evacuated for Irma, and kind of take that context into account when you're messaging?
Yes, which is what I was talking about with Katrina and Rita in 2005. So it kind of went the other way. So in Irma, it went the opposite direction, because instead of basing it off of a storm that really did come in and cause a tremendous amount of damage, they based it off the fact that it didn't do anything. And so now we're like, oh God. And so the message has to be an alarming right out of the gate. Guys, this isn't Irma. That's absolutely right. It's worse.
Yeah, those near misses are terrifying, because you say, what's going to happen on the next one?
Yeah, right. Bob Sheets had a great way of telling people how to deal with that. He said, listen, folks, there's uncertainty at the time you're going to make the decision. Let's say I tell you in your lifetime of living here 4 times, I'm going to tell you to evacuate. 3 times, nothing of it will have happened. You'll wonder why you evacuated. And 1 time your place will be destroyed. I can't tell you which one it is.
It's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
That's a very good visual right there. And if you're there when it's destroyed, it's not going to be fun, and you may go with it. So that's good.
Yeah, the majority of the time we're saying just get out and it's going to be a hurricane and you're going to come home and you're going to think, I didn't need to do that. But that one time you say, I'm glad I left, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, coming up on the top of the hour, coming up on 11 o'clock. It's been a great program. Jim, I want to finish with, I don't know if it's a lighter topic or not, but, we've seen you out in a lot of storms over the years and dealing with some of the crazies, the people that show up in your face, behind you. And I'm sure there's a lot of those we have not seen. How do you deal with that? And are there any experiences that you can share with us that maybe you'd rather hadn't happened?
I was a little disappointed when I was in New Orleans and I had the power company behind me, and one of the guys decided to do like cartwheels, and I'm like, guys, I'm like, we're in this together, for God's sakes, and you're making light of it. And I was adamant about telling everyone that, look, guys, I can stand behind this building and there's no wind, but when I walk out in the wind tunnel, it's so strong it's going to blow you over. I'm in the worst of the wind because this is where I've walked to. But moving 10 feet either direction, it's not as bad. But it was strong enough to blow these dumpsters out through these buildings. I was just trying to show somebody something because I didn't have any flooding. And, oh gosh, what's the storm, guys, I'm thinking of? Ida, right? Wasn't it Ida? So, I mean, that was a bad storm. But you're as a broadcaster, you're a victim of where your spot is, because it's not like you can move, but I can show you what happens when you're in the worst part of the wind tunnel. And that's what I was trying to do. But to have someone who's kind of on my team, which to me is any first responder, just kind of make light of that, that just really ticked me off. And, I saw a couple of those guys later and I said, guys, don't do that. I mean, you know how hard this messaging is? And, especially these days, I think more and more we are just criticized on social media because people see us out there, and whether we're out there too long or not, I don't know. That we're still figuring that out. But I think people want us to be out there, which is why we're out there. But I just don't want people to think that we're out there for the drama. Because like I said, the mantra I've always tried to show is, hey, look, I've asked you guys to leave. The fact that you're doing that, I want to take you through it. I want to show you what's happened here as best as I can, and as best as I can with my team at a safe location. So, especially when we're all on the same team, we can't beat each other up, and there can't be any kind of dissension in the ranks. So that's one of those I wish I could have back.
That's a great answer. That's a great answer. A great thing to finish on. I'll give Bill and Hal a last shot here. We're out of time, but Bill, if you got something you want to comment on, go ahead.
It was great having you on and getting to talk to you, my friend, and hope you have a nice, quiet summer and get some golf in. Likewise.
I have to deal with double vision now, Bill. I have double vision, so it's hard to tell which golf ball is actually on the tee. So that's been a little bit challenging for me. But there's a little behind the scenes you guys didn't know about. But thank you, sir. It's a pleasure to talk to all of you guys. I respect all of you greatly, and we continue to learn from each other. Let's keep doing that. Okay, let's keep doing that.
Terrific. Hal, thank you for your work today as well. We appreciate it.
Yeah, Jim, thanks for coming on the program. Great conversation today.
Likewise, Hal. Thank you.
Great job, gentlemen. Jim, we really appreciate you being here today so much. We really appreciate this program. And I think this alone helps that message get out there and resonate just a little bit better. So thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
And we'll keep talking about it every season, afterward and again, and we'll keep refining the message until we get it right.
You bet. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being part of the program today. Thank our sponsors who make this a possibility: USAA, the South Padre Island Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Weather Company, and Weather Boy. I want to invite you to tune in next week. We have a special program for you. We recorded it Saturday, but we'll play it for you next Wednesday at 10 a.m. We are in Rockport, Texas. Our guests are the mayor of Rockport. That's Tim Jayro, Luis Perron, the director of the Rockport Art Center, Bill Vesey from KIII, retired, but he was working with Hurricane Harvey, and also Juan Pena from the National Weather Service in Corpus Christi. We're talking about Rockport and Hurricane Harvey, which is just a few years ago, and the amazing recovery they've made there and what they've done with their city. So that's next Wednesday at 10 a.m. So we hope you'll join us then. Until then, take care, be safe. Have a great day.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of NTWC Live Hurricane Center Podcast. If you did, head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. And join us next week. This is NTWC Live.